And the ranking member of the subcommittee on border security and enforcement for his 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome today. My first question is, you did take an oath to protect our country. Have you upheld that oath?
I have, Congressman. That's, I believe, the 5th time I've taken the oath of office in my public service career.
Thank you. I'm the ranking member of the Subcommittee for Border Security and Enforcement. I've made it my mission to understand, learn the needs of your personnel at the border, both of our borders, all of our borders. Been at our southern border numerous times, spoken with your men and women in green and blue uniforms. It's clear that today we are facing challenges at home and abroad like we've never faced before. We just returned, my colleagues and I, from a trip to Africa. Common issue across many countries we visited was refugees. Egypt today, according to the president, is hosting 10 million refugees. Just one country alone. Here, we're talking about our budget. Budget for the personnel you need, a budget for the resources you need, Department of Homeland Security, to protect our great country. Yet I've watched my colleagues on the other side of the aisle block the president's emergency supplemental request and to even refuse to consider the Senate's bipartisan border bill. And in the last few months, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have repeatedly threatened to shut down government over the Homeland Security budget. Secretary Mayorkas, can you please explain to us in plain terms what my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, their refusal to pass emergency supplemental requests, how does that put our country's national security in danger?
Congressman, with the additional resources we would be provided in the president's supplemental budget request, we would be able to advance significantly the security of the border. We would have additional equipment, additional technology, additional personnel in every facet of border security.
You talk about additional personnel. Do we have a shortage of personnel right now at our borders?
We do, Congressman. We need additional Office of Field Operations personnel to man our ports of entry. We need additional Border Patrol agents.
Let me talk about that. Our ports of entry, that's where most of the fentanyl coming through this country enters through our ports of entry. San Isidro itself accounts for about 70% of all fentanyl coming into our country. Yet you're telling me we're short of personnel in these critical junctures? Is that what you're telling me, sir?
We are. We need additional field personnel to equip those ports of entry with the staff that we need to enforce our laws.
Mr. Secretary, let me go back and re-ask a question that you did not finish answering that was asked by my colleagues, which is the thousands of empty beds. How do you explain that?
Congressman, you know, recently we've been over capacity in our ICE detention facilities. There are court cases that impose restrictions on our ability to use the beds that we have been funded.
So if the laws were to change, maybe some of those court cases would not apply? Would that be the case?
I would want to get back to you on that, Congressman. I will share with you that the the bipartisan Senate legislation would have funded the Department of Homeland Security with 50,000 detention beds, far more than we are resourced this year, and even more so than we were resourced last year.
So how would that affect the situation that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are talking about? All these individuals that could be essentially held at these empty beds, so to speak. Adding to these empty beds, the talk about all these people being released, would they be held at these beds?
As everyone recognizes, the more detention beds that we are funded for, the more individuals that we would be able to detain, and the Supreme Court has quite clearly recognized the fact that the detention bed capacity for which we have been funded is inadequate to comply to the letter of the law.
Beyond that, the bigger picture here is processing individuals at our borders that may or may not be eligible for asylum. We're critically short in those resources there. I do hope as we move forward, we can address that issue. I'm out of time. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here.
Gentleman yields.